Welcome into another episode of Paul Talks Ball. Today I'm joined by Nick Kirby, co-host of Chatterbox. Reds does a phenomenal job covering the Cincinnati Reds every single day. We're going to talk to Nick in just a second, but I want to make sure to say, if you haven't already, go down and wherever you're watching this right now, especially if it's on YouTube, you subscribe to the show. If you're watching this on Fox 19, you go find us on YouTube and subscribe to the show or wherever you're listening in audio form. But again, Nick Kirby, as we approach the All-Star break now, I will preface this for people watching it. I don't know exactly when this is going to air, so you might be watching this after the All-Star break, and that's why in this show we're going to keep things a little general from the perspective of we're not going to get into talking about each individual game here over the last week or so. I want a bigger overview of the first half of this Red season and what to expect versus the second half of the season. And right now, as we sit here going into the Colorado Rockies series before the All-Star break, the Reds are 3 games out of a wild card spot, and they have yet again reeled us back in right after maybe a lot of people had jumped off the ship after that little losing streak there. They won a couple of games, split the series against the Marlins. It wasn't always pretty. You have 3 games in a row where you only score 1 run, all of that. We're going to get into more of that later as well, because Nick Kirby joining us here for the first half of the show, and then Reds broadcaster Chris Welsh will join us for the second half of this show. So make sure to stick around for that. But Nick, what I want to talk to you about, because you cover this team about as thoroughly and as, this is not the right way to say it from the English language, but as daily as anybody does, and as with what you guys do at Chatterbox Reds. And I want to start off by asking you your impression of the first half of this season compared to what you thought this team was going to be going into the season.
That's a loaded question there, Paul.
Take as much time as you need, Nick.
As it stands right now, I mean, they've been exactly what like the preseason predictors almost expected. I mean, actually, they've been slightly better. So I guess in some respects, they kind of been what they were supposed to be. Now, how they've gotten to this point has been just a roller coaster of a season. And I'm typically a guy, Paul, that is able to navigate some of the emotional waters. I don't want to pat myself on the back, maybe a little better than most, but it's been hard this year. It has been challenging. And I will say about this Reds team, they've been resilient, because there's been several times things that come to mind. Obviously the 3 games in a row where they didn't score a run. They lost back-to-back series at home against the Cubs and the Brewers. They lost the first 2 games of a crucial homestand to the Marlins. They've rebounded. They've been resilient. And I haven't agreed with everything that Terry Francona has done. Certainly a lot of his in-game management decisions don't really coincide with a lot of my more advanced analytical type beliefs about baseball. But the one thing I will say about Terry Francona, he's preached every single day, you move to the next day, and he's preached it in a way that it's clearly had an impact, I think, on this team. Because when you watch post-game interviews with any of the players, they'll echo those same sentiments that he brings. So he's brought in a sense of resiliency and in turning the page, and that's what's kept the Reds afloat. It feels like, Paul, they've walked the tightrope a lot, and they've been able to skate by. The question is, can they find that level of consistency that lasts for longer than maybe a week or 2 of good baseball and get over the hump? Or does the tightrope finally break? I mean, that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, it's funny watching this team, right? And you kind of compare it to a round of golf. It feels like, where every time you have a bad hole, you get down on yourself, you move on, and then all of a sudden you rattle off a couple in a row, right? Maybe a couple pars, maybe a mix of birdie in there, and then, man, mentally you are right back at it. And the world is your oyster. Everything is in front of you. And the more and more I watch this team this year, and whether it's the pitching staff turning out a performance like what we saw from Chase Burns in his debut, or Nick Martinez coming up 3 outs short of a no-hitter, there have been so many electric moments from the pitching staff that then you get mired in some issues offensively where they can't score a run, or Ellie has issues defensively at shortstop, all of these things that you consistently hear about. And you just hope that at some point like in a round of golf, you can put it all together for the back nine of the season, right? That there are the pieces here, but can you consistently put it all together? That to me, with this team, where obviously the discussion right now, the trade deadline. Can you go out there? Can you maybe get a relief arm? Can you go out there? Can you maybe fill a spot in the lineup that you need? Whatever it might be, whatever anybody listening to this thinks that the Reds need to do, if you put your GM hat on, whatever anybody thinks that the Reds need to do to acquire somebody at the trade deadline, they might not. We've seen that year over year with this team. But Nick, as it relates to where this team is right now, do you think they have, when healthy? I know Hunter Green's hurt. Nick Lodolo we just saw it last night, kind of fidgeting with his pitching hand, I believe it was. And just when this team is healthy, do you think they have the pieces to be dangerous down to the latter portion of the season?
Yeah, if they're all healthy, but getting all healthy is a tall task. And Hunter Green is an incredible talent, but it's hard to really bank on him being able to finish off at least this season. And I really hope that Hunter Green gets to the point where he moves past some of these early injury concerns. A pitcher that we just saw recently, if you're a Reds fan, was Zach Wheeler in Philadelphia. Zach Wheeler was an incredible talent, but the narrative around him was he can't stay healthy. He can't ever stay healthy. He can't ever stay healthy. That's why the Phillies got him for an absolute bargain. People might not remember this. The Reds were actually in talks to try to get Zach Wheeler. He was in the Reds' budget, and he ended up going to the Phillies, I think, for a little bit more, but the Reds were strongly considering him. And I hope that Hunter Green can kind of be that Zach Wheeler, almost kind of like a little bit of what Nick Lodolo's been to this year. Nick Lodolo, I don't think anyone thought he could stay healthy, and knock on wood, is hopefully we're not recording this and the poor guy gets hurt. But that start you were just talking about from Lodolo, it was actually a broken nail, but he pitched through it. He threw 6 shutout innings of 3 hits, no walks, didn't walk a batter with a partially broken nail. So Lodolo has learned to kind of be a little bit more, I don't know if durable is the right word, but that's kind of where I'm at. So when they're all healthy, yeah, I mean, this is a good team, but it's hard to ever predict that a team can stay healthy. And my biggest concern is I don't know if there's enough depth beyond that to replace it right now. I think the Reds as an organization can get there, but it just feels like there hasn't been enough replacement players when someone gets hurt that can step in and be a difference maker, kind of like we see with the Milwaukee Brewers. If you ever watch the Reds and the Milwaukee Brewers, it feels like every time that the Brewers have an injury, whoever they call up, instant success. And maybe some of that's good fortune on their part, but it'd be nice to see the Reds kind of get to that level where they can have replacement players that it's not as steep of a drop-off.
Yeah. The trade deadline, I mentioned it coming up here. And again, I don't want to get too bogged down in the trade deadline because people might be watching this after the trade deadline has come and gone. But for people that are watching or listening before the trade deadline, is there anything that you want to see the Reds do specifically, or are you of the mindset, let's hope some of these guys get healthy?
It depends on where the Reds are at, Paul. I mean, so much can change in 3 days. I mean, just as we're recording this now, over the last week. So the Reds were on a Sunday morning. They were a game and a half out of a playoff spot. 2 days later, they were 4.5 games out of a playoff spot. And then 2 days later, they're back to 3 games out. Like it has fluctuated that much. So for me, the Reds have to be within 2 games for me to consider being a buyer. Now, it's not to say if they're 5 games out, it's impossible for them to come back. But I just think the deck would be stacked so far against them that it wouldn't be prudent for this organization to be trying to buy pieces for odds that are that long at that point. If they're in that spot, if they're more than 2 games out, Paul, they need to be sellers. They need to be aggressive sellers, not in terms of selling everyone, but the players that obviously are on expiring contracts, but maybe even some of the players that still have like 2 2.5 years left of on their current contract status. They need to be shopping those players and trying to maximize value, because that's where you can really get big pieces back that can be impact. But if they're within 2 games, especially if they're somehow tied or ahead, then yeah, I think they should be buyers. For me, it would start with looking for significant bullpen help, because that is the one area of this team that I think has no chance of surviving 162. The offense, there's enough pieces that I think you have guys that could, and I said the key word is could, get hot. The starting pitching, I think clearly there's enough pieces that could keep that afloat the rest of the season. The bullpen, it's showing way too many cracks to me, and that's the area that I don't think can survive. So I think you have to start there before you even really go anywhere else. And the one thing I will say, the Reds have acquired bullpen arms at the trade deadline. They did 2020, they acquired Archie Bradley. 2021, they acquired 3 different guys, Givens, Sessa, and Justin Wilson, and then Sam Mullen 2023. So when they've needed bullpen arms, they have been able to get bullpen arms, and most of those guys did help the Reds in the second half of the season.
If there's anybody that you feel like when you talk about selling at the trade deadline, who comes to mind right away that you would say maybe he's somebody you could get a good return for?
Well, I mean, there's the obvious ones. You start with the players that are on expiring contracts. That would be Austin Hayes. That would be Nick Martinez. There's some other ones, but those are the primary ones. There's some other players that I think you should consider, and the key word is consider, because it always depends on what is another team offering you. I'm not trying to trade these guys. I want another team to come blow me away and me try to capitalize on them. So there's 2 players for me that kind of fit that mold of selling high and selling when you're kind of running out of years with them. Because you could trade Nick Martinez at the trade deadline, but Nick Martinez is owed a pretty significant amount of money the rest of the year, and he's an expiring contract. The team's not going to go blow out their farm system for that, but they might for some other players. So there's 2 guys that come to mind, and again, not trying to trade them. I always try to preface that. I'm not trying to trade these guys. Team has to blow me away. First guy would be Nick Lodolo. Nick Lodolo has stayed healthy, and yes, I hope that's a trend for him, but I can't necessarily bank on that. Lodolo, I think, only has a year and a half. I think next year is his last year. Could be 2 years, but he's getting close. The other one's Tyler Stevenson. Tyler Stevenson is a free agent after next season. So you need to be in the point, in my opinion, with Tyler Stevenson, where you're either going heavy, trying to extend him on a contract, or you're starting to consider trading him either at this deadline or in the offseason, because I don't think you want Tyler Stevenson's contract just to run out, because I think he's valuable enough that another team could give you some significant pieces back. And I love Tyler Stevenson. I love for the Reds to offer him a contract extension. But if that's not in the works, then I think trading him would probably make sense.
At Payroll Partners, you're not just a number. We provide a best-in-class HR and payroll experience that's built on award-winning technology and live support customer service with a dedicated payroll specialist who's just a phone call away. You shouldn't have to choose between technology and customer service. At Payroll Partners, you get both. Locally owned and operated, visit payrollpartners.net today. That's payrollpartners.net. Deer Park Roofing has been providing elite service for homes and businesses since 1996 and leads the industry in professionalism, quality, and responsiveness. So whether your needs are residential or commercial, Deer Park can handle any job and ensure it's done right. Deer Park's motto is, protect what's important. And what's important to you is important to Deer Park Roofing. Visit deerparkroofing.com today. deerparkroofing.com.
A lot of the issues that the Reds have had this year stem from defensive issues. And it's always fascinating to me, Nick, when you talk about Major League Baseball teams. This sounds so trivial. It sounds so elementary. But at a very basic level, it's it's always interesting to me when Major League Baseball teams struggle so much defensively, like these professional players that sometimes struggle with routine plays or plays that you feel like, why can't they just be more consistent defensively? It sounds basic to say. I mean, people listening to this are probably going, Paul, I mean, you're playing on the other side, somebody's, off the offense is professional as well. These plays are difficult to make, but at the same time, we have seen the Reds kick the ball around defensively in ways that, the play the other night, the Little League play that comes back to mind, plays that you just don't see major league teams make. I'm not talking about booting a ball underneath your glove necessarily. I'm talking about multiple times this year, plays that just major league teams shouldn't make. Where does, if any, I guess, outside of just skill, the blame for any of that fall in your mind, Nick?
Well, I think for far too long, the Reds as an organization haven't valued defense enough. Now, I think they've actually come around on this. Paul, I think the Reds defensively rank the best they've ranked since like 2019, since I think Jose Iglesias was the shortstop. They rank near the middle of the pack this year, which that's not incredible. Let's not throw a parade for that. But the Reds have ranked near like the bottom 3 or 4 almost every year since 2019. And I think part of that stemmed from the Reds in 2020. They tried it and they had some success. Let's not discount they did have some success, but they just tried to go out and get some mashers. They had Castellanos, they had Winker, not the greatest defensive players, but they tried to just outslug teams. And I think in some respects that kind of put the organization in a trend that didn't go in the right direction. But I'm with you in the sense that I think that has been a silent killer for the Reds. I think in particular in 2021, I think the Reds defense was the reason that team did not make the playoffs. I think everyone points to the bullpen, but they were one of the worst teams defensively. And I think there's a chance that if they had just an average defense, they would have won those extra couple games and gotten to the playoffs. So I think they're headed in the right direction. They've made significant improvements this year. Matt McClain has been a huge improvement at second base. Hasn't hit like you'd want, but defensively, he's been a massive upgrade. Spencer Steer at first base has shocked me how good he's been defensively. Ellie De La Cruz was really bad in April and May. I wonder if some of it was injury related, but in June, he was actually one of the best defensive players in baseball. So it feels like maybe he's turning the corner. And then the outfield's kind of been average, which has been okay. The big key is third base. The Reds have tried like 17 dudes at third base, it feels like, and none of them have stuck. You've either had Santiago Espinal, who's been a good defender, but hasn't been able to hit a lick, especially against right-handed pitching, or everyone else they've thrown out there has been as bad of a defensive player at third base as you can get. So the key to me is Noelvi Marte. Can he stick at third base? Can he finally be the guy that can stick at third base? He was really bad defensively in 2024. 2025, there's been some people thinking maybe he has the yips. I don't know about that. He's looked better at times, but he still just hasn't got that consistency down. So the question is, can Marte be the guy? And if he can't, the Reds got to pivot. They either got to call up a guy like Sal Stewart, who's in the minor leagues, that maybe could be that answer, or they have to go out and try to get someone in free agency and fill that gap. But I think if you get in a competent defensive player at third base, overall, I think the Reds can have a pretty solid defense overall.
That was one of the things I wanted to ask you, Nick, was about looking at, the minor leagues and a lot of the players that the Reds have drafted and tried to develop and bring up. A lot of that young core has found its way to the major leagues. Is there anybody that sticks out in your mind that has the potential to make it up here soon?
Well, there's 2 players right now that I think fit that mold the most. And I'm not talking in terms of there's guys that can maybe get there quicker, but in terms of guys that can actually impact relatively soon, it's Sal Stewart, like I mentioned, and Hector Rodriguez. Both of those guys are at Double-A. Hector Rodriguez acquired in one of the smartest trades in Reds history. Reds traded Tyler Naquin to the New York Mets at the 2022 trade deadline. Got Hector Rodriguez and a pitcher, Jose Acuna, at Double-A that's also pitching very well. And shout out to Tyler Naquin. He's actually a reliever now in the Cleveland Guardians minor league system. He's trying to just stay in baseball, but also thanks to Tyler Naquin for bringing us Hector Rodriguez. Those are two players. Hector Rodriguez, an outfielder. Sal Stewart, it looks like they're making him a full-time third baseman, which kind of hints at I think kind of the Reds' desperation in some aspects of third base, because he had played third base and second base. This year it's been almost exclusively at third base. So those are the two guys. Both those guys have decent power. Rodriguez probably a little bit more power. Good contact. Both guys I think are in the top 5 in their league in hits and average. So those are two guys. And then right behind them is Cam Collier, who started this year on the IL, but has a lot of upside. He's the one guy that if you ask me who in the Reds minor league system in the next 2 or 3 years could come up and be a absolute beast offensively, put up like massive numbers, I think Collier has the best chance of being that star offensively, where Stewart and Hector Rodriguez, I think, have the potential, and it's potential to be good players. I don't know if they have the potential to be elite hitters or really good hitters.
All right, let's turn our attention now to the second half of this season and some of the things that you're really hoping for out of this team in the second half, because like you said, there are things that are out of your control where players need to come back. They need to be healthy. The team needs to stay healthy when they do get back, all of those little things. But what sticks out to you going into the second half of this season, whether it's the schedule or whether it's how they handle themselves in the dog days of August or anything like that sticks out to you, that the first thing that comes to mind heading into the second half of the season?
It's the pitching. How can the pitching hold up for me? The pitching, I don't know if, Paul, I've ever felt going into a year that the Reds felt like they did so much to address starting pitching depth. I mean, you had Rhett Lauder. I mean, you had Chase Burns, and they weren't even like in your top 5 conversations, but the Reds have just had so many pitching injuries, that a few guys that just haven't performed, and the depth has really started to erode, and they're getting by right now, but it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot behind them. Now, there are several really good arms down at AAA as in terms of relievers. We've seen some of them in Luis May and Connor Phillips, Zach Maxwell, another guy that could supplement it. But if the Reds season really goes off the rails, I think it's because the pitching just runs out of gas in some respects. I think the offense will continue to be okay overall. I think they're going to probably be inconsistent like they've been all year, but I don't think the offense is going to get to a point where they have a whole month where you're like, they just never hit for a whole month. The pitching, though, to me, that's the thing that's the most concerning. That's why if you get to the trade deadline and you're right in the mix, that's why I think you need to go the bullpen arm route. And Paul, I'll throw a suggestion here to you. Last year, the Detroit Tigers are an interesting team, how they got to the finish line. They got to the finish line with 2 starting pitchers. But what they did is they just had all relievers, and they did a ton of bullpen games and stuff like that. So for me, for the Reds, you have enough starting pitchers on the surface that are good, that you only really need help if you have injuries, which is possible. I'm not saying that's not. But with the bullpen, you can add several bullpen arms and just kind of have them in the mix. I would kind of like to go all in on adding relievers. And if you get to a point, you just do some bullpen games. Bullpen games, I think, has a negative connotation.
I was going to say, people hear bullpen games, Nick, and they immediately get turned off.
How many times have we seen bullpen games work for the Reds, or an opponent does a bullpen game against the Reds and it works flawlessly? I mean, the Tigers legitimately got to the playoffs doing that. Now, I don't think you can do that over 162 games and survive, but I think if you have a big starting pitching injury, I think that you can do it for a month or maybe even 6 weeks. So that's where that'd be my suggestion. Go all in on relievers. Try to add maybe 3 relievers, 3 above average big league relievers, and mix and match. And I tell you what, of Terry Francona's strengths, I think his number one strength is managing the bullpen. I think he does a really good job of that. He got the Cleveland Indians at the time to the World Series in 2016 by managing the bullpen really well. And that's where I think his biggest strength is. So that's what I would go all in for if I was the Reds.
Offensively, the pieces here, Ellie De La Cruz, Matt McClain's it's been nice seeing Matt McClain try to turn a corner here after a really rough start to the season, where you're thinking to yourself after watching Matt McClain, and he's hurt, he comes back a couple years ago, you're hoping he can be what you need him to be, and now he's starting to turn that corner. Is there somebody that is, I always like to ask this question, flying under the radar or not the big time name that sticks out to you as somebody that the Reds really need to produce offensively that maybe we're not talking about a ton?
Let me give you two guys' names of players that I think could step up in the second half and be impact players that maybe you're not considering. The first one's a guy that I already traded away earlier in our show, Tyler Stevenson. But again, if the Reds are in the race, they're not trading Tyler Stevenson. Tyler Stevenson was the Reds' best hitter in the second half last season. Up to this point, he's been fine. He hasn't been good, but hasn't been great. I'm sorry, hasn't been bad, but hasn't been great. Whatever. I think he's a guy that could be poised for a big second half that you might not maybe expect as much. The other guy for me, I think he's a guy that I don't think enough people put him in that same group as Ellie and McClain and some of the other guys. It's Noelvi Marte. I mean, I think a lot of people forget that Noelvi Marte was a top 20 prospect, and Matt McClain was like barely a top 100 prospect for like a few weeks. Noelvi Marte has the much higher prospect pedigree. And that doesn't mean everything. It doesn't mean anything once you get to the big leagues. But I think Marte has a lot more upside than I think maybe a lot of people think. Obviously, the 2024 season could not have gone worse for Marte, start to finish in every aspect of everything. But he's a very talented player. He's hitting the ball harder than I expected. He's had some exit velocities that I was like, I did not expect that from Noelvi Marte. He's also incredibly fast. He's one of the fastest players on the team. So Noelvi Marte coming out and having like a 900 OPS in the second half, that might sound crazy to some. I don't think that's maybe necessarily impossible. So he's the one player that is maybe the wild card for the Reds, that if he just plays to anywhere close to some of his potential in the second half, could really take the Reds from a spot where they're, kind of an offense, maybe okay, to maybe being a decent above average offense.
Do you think the Reds make the playoffs, Nick Kirby?
Oh, wow. Just guns a-blazing. I mean, if you're going to ask me right away, I mean, right now, 3 games out, I would have to say it's not likely. I mean, it's not impossible, but I can't, as much as I want to say, as much as it pains me to not be the guy that just jumps. Yeah, sure. I think the Reds would need more things to go right than I would expect to go right to get there.
When you start looking at the math of when you say things going right? Like, so as we sit here right now, Cubs lead the division. The Brewers are above the Reds in the wild card race. They're 2.5 games safe in the wild card race right now. The Cardinals are right above the Reds. They're a game out. Reds are 3 games out. This could change within, a few days, as we've already covered here. I mean, these things have fluctuated all season, but you have to think that the Brewers and the Mets and the Phillies and the Cubs and the Dodgers, at least 4 of those 5 teams are pretty safe, if not all 5 of those teams are pretty safely in the postseason right now, right? You could say maybe the Mets pull a classic Mets and stumble down, but to me, I think the Mets are a playoff team at 12 games over 500 right now. So that leaves one spot between the Reds, the Cardinals, the Padres, and the Giants. That leaves you one postseason spot. And when you look at it from that perspective, that's to me where the math gets hard. Because if you just look at it and you say, oh, the Reds are 3 games out, you're like, oh, you can make up 3 games in 6 days. But it's when you really start looking at the teams that you're competing with and you realize, oh, wow, okay, it's 4 or 5 teams for 1, maybe 2 spots if you can get lucky.
Yeah, it fluctuates a lot. I really felt better a couple weeks ago when the Reds were not just like 2 games out of a playoff spot. they were like 2 games behind all 3 playoff spots. Like they were all kind of jumbled together. The top 2 at this point have kind of separated themselves from the pack. So that's where it does make the math hard. But you know what? There's a lot of teams that have just collapsed, that have been unexpected. So it's always a possibility. You never know how it's going to play out. If the Reds continue to win, they'll give themselves a chance. But when I say things going right, the biggest thing going right is that third wildcard spot not being 88 wins. You need that third wildcard spot to be like 85, 84 wins. That is probably more important for the Reds than their individual performances. Is what does that final wildcard spot end up being? And it's hard to predict how that'll go. It really is. Because going into, there was a point at maybe the into May where it looked like that final wildcard spot was going to be a 90-win team. And then it felt like everyone struggled for a while, and you were looking, it's like, man, it might be 83, 84 wins. And now it's kind of gone up a little bit. So I don't know. It's hard to predict what that'll end up being. But that's really what determines if the Reds really have a chance or not, as sad as that is.
Well, Nick, I don't want to leave things on a low note here, so I'm going to ask you one thing that Reds fans watching this can look forward to in the second half. Answer that however you like.
Well, I mean, it's pretty simple. It's Elly De La Cruz. I mean, this guy's an absolute superstar, and he's just getting better and better. As we record this, Elly De La Cruz has a lower strikeout rate than Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge. That's crazy. I think a lot of people, strikeouts were the big thing. He has cut down his strikeouts by, I think, about 8% this year. And that was an improvement already from the year before. So he's cutting down his strikeouts. His defense has improved from the early in the year. He's just getting better and better. And there's no ceiling for Elly De La Cruz. That's what there's no ceiling whatsoever for him. So whatever happens with the Reds, he's an exciting player to watch every night. And I'm fascinated to see how high can he climb in the MVP race. Because right now, I think if the season ended today, I think he probably would get some votes, be at the back end. I don't think he's going to win the NL MVP, but could Elly finish 3rd, 4th, top 5? I think it's possible. So that'll be maybe one of the most interesting things to watch. And the other, I'll give you one more. It's also Chase Burns. How deep is he able to go into the season? Because that obviously helps the Reds right now. But I also want to see him go, be a little closer to being able to give you a full season next year. I don't think he's maybe going to be completely there or not have the training breaks completely pulled off in 2026. But the deeper he can go this year, the more of an impact he can be next year.
Nick, I appreciate you joining the show today. Tell people where they can find you and where they can listen to you.
Yeah, Chatterbox Reds, everywhere you get podcasts. We're on Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. Live post-game shows after every single Reds game. We go live in the 9th inning on YouTube and then up in your podcast feed. I mean, literally just about every single morning from the time spring training starts until the offseason, and then plenty of offseason coverage as well.
Nick, I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, Paul.
What makes us human? Humanity is found in the actions that redefine care. Actions that we at TriHealth take every day. By seeing those who feel invisible, hearing needs that have been ignored. TriHealth is healing the body and the human spirit, so all can know and live a better life.
Welcome into another episode of Paul Talks Ball. Really appreciate Chris Welsh from the Cincinnati Reds TV and radio analysts, and of course, former pitcher for the Reds, joining us here today on the show. Chris, I'll get right into it here. I know your time is limited, so I want to ask you about the first half of this season. We're recording this right before the All-Star break on the day of the first game of the Rockies series here. So I want to get your thoughts overall before we get into the nitty-gritty of what this first half of the season has broken down from the Reds' perspective, because it's been a roller coaster. Obviously, 4-game losing streak. You roll into a 2-game winning streak here, trying to maybe ride a wave. We talked so much about, can they go 6-1, 7-0 this week leading into the All-Star break, but generating some momentum, right? You have a couple of All-Stars on this team. Andrew Abbott gets the call, Ellie De La Cruz, and you're trying to ride some of that wave of momentum into the second half and claim a playoff spot. What's been your biggest takeaway from the first half of this season?
I think, Paul, that first, thanks for having me. I do appreciate you having me on. I think the first thing is that this team's trying to figure out its identity. You got a brand new manager. You got some new coaches in here. You exited the old manager. You made some major changes to the roster right out of the get-go by, letting Alexis Diaz go. And then subsequently later on, figuring out what to do with Jamer Candelario. So this team's trying to figure out who they are, really. And that's why they were kind of stuck in that gray area of mediocrity, between, say, 4 games over 500 and 4 games under, and then they would win 4 and then they lose 3 or 5, things like that. And it was one of these things where nobody's really sure who they are yet, but I think that they're playing better. The one encouraging thing is that when we did go through Cleveland and talk to all the people up there, they assured us, and you can look it up, that I think in 9 of the 11 seasons that Terry Francona managed the Guardians up there, or the Indians/Guardians in Cleveland, that they were better in the second half than they were in the first half. And I think that he keeps telling us that. We have a daily meeting with Terry Francona, totally off the record. We get a lot of inside stuff that we haven't gotten from other managers before. And I truly believe this guy really believes that his ball club is going to play better in the second half.
Do you think all of that rubs off on the players as much as the fans hope that it does? You get the new manager in there and you want the new manager to take this club in a new direction and hope that he can turn a lot of the same unit around that was here last year. Do you think that's rubbed off and you're starting to see that?
Yeah, to steal a line out of an old TV show, he's a manager, not a miracle worker, right? But he does have a way of getting guys to believe in themselves and putting them in a situation where they are more likely to succeed than just trying to, hit the jackpot on a long shot. And I think that he's also had quite a bit of influence on the front office, because he's his own evaluator. I mean, Terry Francona knows what kind of player he wants on this roster, and he's not going to sit back and allow the front office to bring guys in here that he doesn't think is going to fit. And I think that stands from a baseball talent standpoint and also, a chemistry standpoint inside the clubhouse. I think that some of the injuries that they've had have derailed the club a little bit. I think Austin Hayes, losing him for a couple of different periods of time, he's not a superstar player, but he's a good, solid, in the middle of the lineup, right-handed bat that they haven't had for a while. And they've been experimenting with some other guys. I think Spencer Steer at the beginning of the year was still injured. He hurt himself last year. He didn't have a good year last year. He ended up getting off to a terrible start. He probably should have started the year on the injured list and done a lot of rehab along the way before he finally got good, because he was getting beat by fastballs every night. All day, every day. And that's not him. He's got a pretty short swing, and he can usually get on that pitch. So you knew something was wrong there. So as long as you're going out there with guys who, we're not talking about Ohtani and Judge playing at 90%. We're talking about, Austin Hayes and Spencer Steer playing at 90%. It's a big difference right there. And they've got to be on top of their game in order to compete, and the team depends on that.
You look at the pitching staff of this team, Chris, and it's definitely had its bright spots throughout this season. It's been fun to watch. Andrew Abbott is now an all-star, very well deserved there. Hunter Green going out with an injury. I'm interested to see in the second half of this season, you get Hunter Green back, hopefully here soon, but things have started to trickle with his injury. What are you looking for out of the pitching staff here in this second half to kind of continue that momentum and really set the tone for what this team has been?
In Major League Baseball, unless you're getting better, you're getting worse. And I think that's been the key for guys like Abbott and Nick Lodolo, because they've undergone some pretty substantial mechanical changes that a lot of people don't even realize. But, they're both guys that threw terribly across their body, and they finally got straightened out a little bit. They're still across their body, which is a good thing. But not as dramatically as before. And what it has done for Abbott is opened up his changeup way better than it ever was before, because you can't throw a changeup when you've got a closed hip. And I think the same thing for Lodolo, but as that comes with his breaking ball. He was so used to stepping right towards that first base on deck circle that he'd flip that big breaking ball in there, it'd be sideways about 4 feet, and it was just hard to land sometimes. That's why he was hitting so many right-handed hitters with it. And I think that Derek Johnson's done a terrific job with them to get them to the next step. And I think that it's really beginning to show right now. So, a lot of it revolves around Hunter Green, no question, but he hasn't shown us yet that he can complete a season in the major leagues without being injured, one thing or another. And it's not his fault, but it just kind of happens. But it also happens to guys that throw hard. When you hover around 100 miles an hour, you put a lot of strain on your body, no matter how physically gifted you are. And eventually those guys get hurt. Doesn't mean the slow throwers don't get hurt. They do too. But it seems to me more often hard throwing guys, 100-mile-an-hour guys, end up straining themselves. So, he's got a leg strain now, groin injury that has been, if you ever had something like that, it's very deep. It feels like it's right against the bone, and it takes forever to heal. And hopefully he comes back, because when he's on his game, there are a few better than in the game of baseball.
He doesn't throw 100 miles an hour, but Brent Suter has been phenomenal for the Reds this season. And I think it's, one, on the field, but two, what he has done to endear himself to the fans as being a local guy, great personality, he's very engaging, and then to back it up with how well he's pitched out of the bullpen this season. Chris, it feels to me like he's the reliable arm that the Reds have looked for, kind of tried to shift around for some of those relief appearances that they've needed in a pinch. How impressed have you been with him?
He's kind of a Swiss Army knife. He can start. He's opened up a couple of games. He's been a starter in the past. He can do that. I think, here's how you endear yourself to the fans. You play well and you help the team win. It doesn't matter how many charities you have. If you stink out there on the field, a lot of people aren't going to buy into your game. So he's been pretty good. I mean, there's been some times when he's eaten up some runs, hurt his earned run average and so on. But Suter brings a lot because he leads by example. He's a guy that just doesn't sit back and rah-rah. He's in there working hard, in on everything, helping the young pitchers as much as he can. I mean, here's a guy that went to Harvard and he throws 89 miles an hour and he's been in the big leagues for 8 years. So he's a pretty smart guy. I think the one thing he does from a pitching standpoint, I talk a lot on the air about extension. He's 6'5", and he pitches like he's 7'5" because his stride to home plate is so long. I've talked to him about that a lot. He tells me that's a big part of his game, that he intentionally developed that, because 89 is not good enough to get hitters out. But 89, looks like 89 is actually 93. That's what gets hitters out. So he jumps at the hitters. He's got one of the fastest pitch tempos in all of the game of baseball. And I think that he's a real valuable player to this team, even though he's not one of the guys you think of immediately when you talk, from top to bottom on the pitching staff.
Chase Burns had an electric debut against the Yankees, but then he only lasted a third of an inning against the Red Sox his next time out, tipping pitches. The Reds said that they would address it, comes out for his third start, gives up 3 runs. Chris, are you concerned at all with Chase Burns that he maybe should have gotten one more start in AAA, or do you think, no, these are just growing pains in the major leagues, he'll be fine, he's a great pitcher, he'll figure it out?
Well, one of the reasons why he's here is that he wasn't being challenged in AA, in AAA. He was blowing people away. So I think that he needs to learn this up here. I'm not one bit concerned about Chase Burns. I mean, think about his first 3 starts. I mean, the New York Yankees in Fenway Park, full house, both those places. And then in Philadelphia, where they got 42,000 screaming people, that it's not the friendliest place to pitch. Oh, also he's facing Zach Wheeler. So, it's one of these things where Burns has got a tremendous fastball and a tremendous arm and a really good gift for learning pitching, and he's going to come along. But you got to remember, the kid is just 1 year out of college. No matter how good your arm is, these big league hitters are way better than they are at AAA. I mean, there is just no comparison anymore. Used to be a little bit closer between the minor leagues and the big leagues, not any longer. So Chase Burns is here because of 2 reasons. One, they had an opening in the pitching staff with Hunter Green on the IL. And then they also feel like this kid is major league ready. And, there was some debate as to whether you're going to give him a start or work him out of the bullpen. But either way, he's big league stuff.
We talked about the pitching staff. Now let's talk about the lineup a little bit. I know you only have a few minutes left, so I want to ask you about what this lineup has done, or at times not done this year, Chris, because you look at that losing streak here over the last few days before they turn around, win a couple in a row. But you have, again, a streak where 3 consecutive games you only score 1 run, and there have been spurts of that this season. What is it going to take for this offense to find some consistency?
Ellie De La Cruz got to have a monster year. I mean, look at the teams that aren't bolstered with, 4 or 5 all-stars. The Dodgers don't need only Ohtani because they've got a lot of other guys in that lineup that are really great players. But the Reds need Ellie De La Cruz to have an MVP season. We used to say this all the time when Joey Votto was around here and he was surrounded by a supporting cast that was okay. But unless Votto had an MVP year, this team wasn't going anywhere. And it's the same way with Ellie De La Cruz. I hate to say it, but this team revolves around Ellie. And he's 23 years old. So it's kind of a big thing to put on his shoulders. I think he can accept that. But when he plays well, other guys relax and play well also. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing going forward. We've seen TJ Friedl have a great first 2.5 months. And then he's coming back down a little bit. We see other guys beginning to come around a little bit. I think a lot of people are surprised by the production of Will Benson when he got hot there for a while. But guys are like that. If you look at the history of average major leaguers, okay? Out of a 6-month season, those guys give you 3 months of really good baseball and 3 months of maybe not so great baseball. It's up to the manager to figure out when those 3 months are going to happen. And I think that's the biggest thing right now. But Ellie De La Cruz has to be a superstar in order for this team to go anywhere.
Chris, give me your player to watch here in this second half, outside of Ellie, outside of maybe a Matt McClain, somebody like that. Give me somebody that you're hoping can provide a spark for this team in the second half.
Wow. I think the team revolves also around Friedl at the top of the lineup. I mean, when he gets on, he makes things happen. He had a meeting with Terry Francona at the beginning of the year. He said, I get on 2 times a game. I don't care how you do it. So now he's broken out his bunt game a little bit. He gets on base. He's not in a hurry to swing the bat. He's one of the guys that is the least swing happy in the league, especially during his first debut. So I think that he would be the guy that kind of makes the offense go. I really do. The other guy, and this is kind of a long shot here, is Marte at third base. Now, he's getting a lot of flack because he's got an erratic throwing arm and maybe his feet aren't used properly defensively and so on. But, again, he's a 23-year-old. So, he's a kid with a great upside. There's something about that kid that I really like, and he's going to hit. He's a danger at the plate. To me as a pitcher, looking at him at the home plate, I mean, I size him up. I'm thinking, hey, this guy's dangerous. And, yes, you can get him out now, but I think if those 2 guys contribute to have a pretty good second half, they're going to give you a nice balance in the lineup with some other guys that are already there.
Chris, last question for you here. People may be watching this a week or 2 down the road, and buzzword, of course, trade deadline coming up. What do you hope? What do you maybe anticipate? What would you like to see the Reds do, if anything, at the trade deadline?
I think the Reds need another relief pitcher as good or better than Santillan or Pagan. And I said that last year to the front office. I told them, I said, you know what? You don't know what's going to happen with Alexis Diaz. He's been getting guys out with pitches that are outside the strike zone. You can't continue that forever. You got to prepare for that. And fortunately, we had Emilio Pagan back. He's healthy now, throwing the ball as hard as he used to before he was injured. And the Reds, they had him last year. He's only throwing 93, 94. Now he's throwing 97, 98. Big difference when you're a closer. But I think you need one more of those bridge pitchers to get you from the 7th to the 9th inning, or maybe even be a closer if you use Pagan too many days in a row. You need one stud of a right-handed or left-handed, but probably right-handed reliever that can come in, that has shown the ability to pitch in good big games down the stretch. And he could be a 40-year-old out there, but I mean, you need somebody who knows what he's doing and he's got the arm to get guys out.
Chris, I really appreciate you taking a few minutes here this morning to catch up on the Reds as we head into the second half of the season. Best of luck to you on the air. I know everybody's going to be watching and listening, and enjoy the second half here of Reds baseball.
All right, Paul. Thank you for having me, and I hope we get to visit again sometime soon.
Absolutely.